Good evening, everyone. Hoping that you can hear me.
Yes. Hi, Lauren.
Hi, Naima.
How are you?
My apologies. I was sitting in apparently the wrong waiting room, but I was on time. I was on time in the wrong place. So.
That is totally fine. I am so happy that you're here, and we're gonna have such a great workshop today. For those of y'all that don't know me, I'm Naima. I'm gonna be your host tonight for the student loan workshop with the fabulous Lauren Williams. So I'll just do a brief introduction, and I will let Lauren take it away. Okay?
Sounds good.
So, Lauren Williams Cfp is a 4-time Olympian, 3-time Olympic medalist, and the first American woman to earn a medal in both, the Summer and Winter Olympic Games. That is amazing. We are in the presence of greatness. While pursuing professional sports, Lauren interacted with not one, but 2 financial advisors that didn't provide the services she needed. She asked friends what they were doing about their finances, and the answers were vague and unsettling. Constantly looking for ways to make a difference in the lives of others, she decided to put her finance degree and MBA. My girl has letters, okay? letters, come on, to use to fill the gap for young professionals. Eager to learn everything, she then pursued the Certified Financial Planner designation, which is also the gold standard in financial planning. So just, lots of medals. Her company, Worth Winning, offers virtual services to help young professionals get the answers to the financial questions that matter the most to them, whether that is creating a budget, figuring out a plan for paying off student loans, setting goals for savings, or understanding your 401k. Worth Winning is ready to help you with all things personal finance. Now, I'm super excited to learn more about the different options out there for student loans, and I'm sure that everyone else here is also excited about that. If you have questions, there will be a time for questions right around 8 o'clock. Please drop those questions in the chat so that we can answer them at that time. So Lauren, take it away.
Alrighty, let's get this party started. Well, good evening, everyone. So once again, thanks for your patience. Let's see here. No, I'm not sure that. So Naima, with your sharing screen, click twice to minimize.
I'm sharing the screen, so you can just
talk.
Just talk, and I'll go through the slides.
Oh, you'll click for me. Ooh.
Yes.
All right, here we go. So Naima did a great job of sharing all about me, so I don't need to do very much of telling you about that. But tonight we're here to talk about big, bad. They're not so big and so bad when you have a clear plan. So let's see if we can't figure that out for you ladies this evening. Because once you feel like you have a clear plan, then these won't feel like a cloud that's hanging over your head or a ball and chain that is dragging you along the way. So the first thing I want to say is tonight we'll be kind of focusing on federal student loans. Why? Because private student loans have very limited options. So if you have private student loans, your best bet is going to be to pay them back and to get on a clear budget and a clear plan to be able to do so. But with federal loans, you've got a lot of different options. One of them is paying them back in full. And we've got even more options now because COVID happened. We're all currently, anybody who has federal student loans, in what we call an administrative forbearance because of COVID. So you should have been taking advantage of $0 payments and 0% interest. But what's the right thing for you to do in light of what's going on right now is what we're going to try to get to the bottom of tonight. So the first slide you're looking at here says standard. So we're going to talk about all the different repayment plans that exist within the federal system and why they may or may not be a good idea. So the standard repayment plan is what happens kind of automatically after you finish your school. You get a 6-month grace period. So there's this 6 months where they kind of like, oh, you're loan free. Hopefully you got a job. Their idea is that you get a job and you get everything settled and they kind of give you a little bit of time before the payments kick in. But mostly what happens is we forget that student loans exist at all. And then it's like, wham, ta-da, pay me. And it's always set up so that you pay it over a 10-year period. So whatever that payment is so that it will be done in 10 years is what they hit you with. sometimes that is a huge payment, and it's much bigger than your new salary post-education. So what happens is at the end of a 10-year period, you're paid in full, you're done, you don't have to worry about these loans anymore. The problem with the standard 10-year is, one, the federal student loan system usually gives us pretty crappy interest rates, and two, if we're going to be done in a 10-year period, why wouldn't we go and find a lower interest rate with a private company? So if it's, like I said, if it's a huge student loan balance, that 10-year payment could be something that is, twice your rent, twice your mortgage, your whole paycheck even, I've seen, and it can be very unnerving. So you want to make sure that you understand that the first thing they're going to put you on is a standard 10-year, but that you do have other options. So other options that people choose, these are not actually payment plans, but options that people are interested in are deferment and forbearance. So deferment is basically you deciding that I can't pay these loans for some reason. So one of the reasons could be that you're in school for at least half time. So you can go back to school, they automatically put your loans into deferment. Because you're in a period of unemployment, you can ask for a deferment. Active duty military is another reason, Peace Corps. And the big thing about the deferment, and the thing that makes the deferment better than a forbearance, is that you're not responsible for the interest on your subsidized loans. So when we say subsidized loans, some of your loans might have been granted for undergraduate school based on need. And those loans would have been subsidized, which means while you were in school, they were not accruing interest. And then once you got out of school, the interest accrues. And when you go into these things called like deferment, you do not accrue interest at that time either. So they're nicer loans. They give you a little bit of leeway, whereas all the other loans that you have, mostly people are borrowing for graduate school, and they have these plus loans, and all of those don't go into deferment. They can go into deferment, but they don't have interest kind of subsidized for you at that time. The interest is going to be accruing, and when you come out of that deferment, the interest is going to capitalize, which means it's going to pile up on top of your principal payment. Now, in contrast, there is the forbearance. So deferment is actually nicer because you said the interest doesn't accrue, whereas with forbearance, all of your loans are accruing interest. So even if you have subsidized loans, they're accruing interest. Now, it's less strict requirements. You can call and just say, like, I don't feel like paying these loans right now. Can y'all give me a forbearance right now? And that's what happens. It's pretty easy. Whereas the deferment, you have to prove that you have some sort of need. It's not super hard to get deferment, but it's one thing to know. If you cannot pay your loans, you want to choose one thing versus the other, and deferment being the better of those two things. So the other thing to know about forbearance is that you have 3 years to use your forbearance. You can use 3 months of forbearance. You can use a 6-month forbearance. You can just do, a quick 1 month while you're transitioning, maybe from purchasing a home to, renting a home to purchasing a home or something like that. But in general, forbearance and deferment are two things that you want to avoid. So this is the way that we all stick our head in the sand and pretend that our student loans don't exist, by choosing deferment or forbearance. If you truly cannot afford to pay on your loans, you have other options that are better than these two options, and you want to be choosing one of those two options. So this is the kind of default. People see the standard, and they're like, oh my goodness, I can't afford this payment. And so what do they choose next, the deferment or the forbearance, when they actually have other options, and that's what we're getting ready to talk about. So what do we have as options? Other payment plans that exist are the extended and the graduated plan. So these also, so I'm starting from worst case scenario to best case scenario. So standard, not a good option, because if you can afford to pay the standard amount, you probably want to refinance. Deferment and forbearance, not a good option. They're reserved for when you get in, big trouble and you really just need some relief immediately. And then we're on to like actual payment plans, extended and graduated plans. So the extended plan is the payments are spread over a 25-year period. You must have at least $30,000 of debt in order to be able to opt into the extended plan. And then you get this lower standard repayment. So what happens is at the end of 25 years, you're paid off in full, but you spread your payments out over 25 years. So remember, if we're going to pay over 10 years, let's say they tell us our payment is $2,000 a month. Now we're paying over 25 years, and the payment drops down to, $750 a month. You're like, ooh, that feels so much better. Well, the problem with the extended plan is that, that feels a lot better, but what does it cost you over time? Because the same amount of interest is accruing. And remember, I told you that the federal student loan system typically does not have good interest rates. So what I see mostly is around 6.5, 7% as an interest rate, whereas in contrast, you can get like a 4.5, just average credit, average debt to income ratio right now. And because of COVID, interest rates are extraordinarily low. So we're seeing people getting 2 and 3% interest rates. So why would I want to pay loans back over a 25 period at 7% interest while, it looks good in my monthly budget? It ends up costing me 3 or 4 times what I actually borrowed, and it's not an efficient way to pay over time. Now, the graduated plan is similar, but you graduate and it extends every 2 years. So it's like you graduate from, a $750 payment up to an $850 payment 2 years later. Then 2 more years goes by and they're figuring like, well, you should have got some increases in your income. So now we're going to increase your payment, to more, a little bit more. And then it keeps going for every 2 years. And so they calculate your payment based on a 10 to 30 year term, depending on how much you owe. And at that time period, like I said, every 2 years it goes up and you'll still be paid in full. So the good thing about these 2 plans is that you'll be paid in full at the end. The bad thing about it is you will have taken the least cost efficient way to becoming paid in full. If you can actually afford to pay the loans in full, then you should be doing so on a 10-year plan or paying as aggressively as humanly possible. So if you're on extended or graduated, these are not optimal plans. And if you got 20 or 25 years, up to 30 years to, you're willing to wait that long to pay on your loan, then you're going to want to choose one of the options that we have next, which are the income-driven plans. So with income-driven repayment, there's a lot of acronyms with the student loan system, and that's the thing that gets a little bit unnerving for people. So you're just like, oh my goodness, there's, this thing and that thing, and I think I'm enrolled in this. And so the first acronym is IDR, Income-Driven Repayment. That is the name of the program overall. And then underneath that umbrella of income-driven repayment, you have the 4 options that are listed. So you can choose income contingent repayment, income-based repayment, pay as you earn, and revised pay as you earn. And I know you guys are just like, wait, well, they all sound exactly the same. But we got lots of different acronyms: ICR, IBR, PAYE, and REPAYE. And so all of these are different, and there are optimal plans within these. The big thing that you want to know about an income-driven repayment plan is that it's tied to your income, and they're going to reevaluate it every 12 months to see if your income has changed, and they're going to adjust your payment accordingly. So you should be able to pay more if you make more, pay less if you make less. But the main thing you want to know and understand is that you are trying to go for some sort of forgiveness if you choose an income-driven plan. The only reason that you would choose an income-driven plan and not be planning on going for forgiveness is if you just know you need a short little time period to pay on your loans until something happens. So as an example, what I see frequently where income-driven plans are good for a short period of time is physicians. They're in school, they're doing their residency, and they're making, $40,000 or $50,000 a year. And once that 4-year residency is over, they're going to go to a big attending salary, let's say a couple $100,000 a year. And so they need something affordable during that 4-year period. And then they're going to switch over and start paying their loans back aggressively at that time. Otherwise, you don't want to be on an income-driven plan for 10 or 15, 20 years and then end up paying the loans in full. Why? Because that's going to be a cost or ineffective way, cost-wise, to pay the loans back. So now let's talk about what the various income-driven repayment plans are. And if you're on one, what you should be considering and what you need to be thinking about. So the first one is income contingent repayment. We skipped one. There we go. There's my blank slide. So, yes, that blank slide is blank for a reason. If you are on income contingent repayment, ICR, then you should not be, unless you have Parent Plus loans. And since we are young, rich, and responsible, I'm going to assume that no one here this evening has Parent Plus loans. It is the worst of the income-driven plans, and so often I see people that are on it, and they don't know why they're on it. And the reason you should not be on it is because it's based on 20% of your discretionary income. The other plans that I'm going to talk about are a lesser percentage. So you want to be on the plan that's going to allow you to pay as little as humanly possible towards the loans so that you can maximize your savings and for retirement and other things. So income contingent, The reason the slide's blank is because I just don't want you on that plan unless you have Parent Plus loans, which like I said, 99% chance this group does not. All right, so moving on to income-based repayment, IBR. This is a viable option. So it's based on your income, and then you pay over a period of 20 or 25 years. Generally, it's 25 years because of your graduate school loan. So if you have undergraduate loans only and you want to pay on an income-based repayment plan, you would pay over a period of 20 years. The problem with having only undergraduate school loans is that you probably have about $30,000 in debt. So generally, like I said, we're always talking broad strokes here because we know everything is not one size fits all. So we're trying to learn the things that may be applicable to us. But generally, if you only have undergraduate loans and you have that $30,000 of debt, you're going to earn more than you owe. So let's say you get a new job and you make $50,000 a year. You owe $30,000. You only have that undergraduate degree. Your best bet is going to be to pay those loans off, unless you're working in public service. So public service being something like a teacher, working at a government agency, a nonprofit organization. That's where you might want to consider trying to, maximize having only $30,000 of debt and then trying to get some sort of forgiveness. Other than that, generally, if you make more than you owe, you want to get on a plan to pay your loans back. So with income-based repayment, you pay over that either 20 or 25-year period, but it's based on you paying on 15% of your income. So if you remember on income contingent repayment, I just told you it was 20% of your income. So this is a little bit less. It's going to give you a lower monthly payment, but it's still not the lowest. The reason that you might be on income-based repayment is because you don't have what they call direct loans. So direct loans are loans that were only given after 2010. So 2010 and beyond, if that was when you first borrowed, you definitely have direct loans and you don't have to choose income-based. You'll have other options available to you. But if you borrowed before 2010, there's a chance that some of your loans were direct, but there's also a chance that some of your loans are what we call FFEL loans. And so with FFEL loans, they're federal family education loans, and they're like the old school loans. And it's just kind of the luck of the draw. There was direct before 2010, but there was also FFEL, and you may have lucked out and got direct already. But if you got FFEL, you need to do what we call a consolidation in order to turn them into direct loans. So if you're on income-based repayment, you might feel like that's the only option available to you, but it could be as simple as consolidating the loans, them becoming direct loans, and then you're not needing to be on income-based anymore, and instead being on one of the next two payment plans I'm going to talk to you about. So let's see what we have next. Pay as you earn. All right, so this is my favorite of the income-driven plans. The reason is that unlike the other two, so we talked about income-based repayment and we talked about ICR. They're both over a period of 25 years for the most part. Pay as you earn is definitely over a period of 20 years. However, there are some caveats. So you need to have borrowed after 2007. So October 1st of 2007, if your loans start after that date, then you could be eligible for the pay as you earn plan. If you had even one loan before that date, you're not going to be eligible for pay as you earn. So that's one thing that you're like, oh man, I didn't see that when I tried to sign up. It's probably because you borrowed before October 1st of 2007. So what did I just talk about in the previous slide? I was saying, well, before 2010, a different date, some loans were direct and some loans were not. Well, you also need to have direct loans to be able to participate in pay as you earn. So now let's say you borrowed in December of 2007, you're after the date, so you're after October 1st of 2007, but you're before 2010 and you got these FFEL loans. So you may actually be eligible for the pay as you earn plan, but not be able to get on it because you don't realize that you don't have the right kind of loans to get on the plan. Simple thing to do though is consolidate those loans and get them eligible for the program. Now the thing that's cool is we went from, like I said, 20% on ICR, 15% on IBR, to now we're at 10% on pay as you earn. So 10% of your discretionary income is how they're going to calculate the payment. And it's not just 10% of, you bring home X dollars and we get to do 10% of that. There's a whole formula. So it's 1.5 times the federal poverty rate based on your family size, and then, 10, 15, or 20% of your income. So you don't need to know the big fancy calculation. You just need to know the basics that this one is going to give you the lowest payment and it's going to be a 20-year period, whereas the other two are going to be 25-year periods. So that's 5 years less of paying, which means less money out of your pocket, more money to do something else with. However, 5 years less of paying means you're probably going to have a lot more forgiven. So we're going to talk about forgiveness overall in just a second. So, you see here, it says must plan for the tax on the forgiven amount. On any of these income-driven plans, you're going to need to plan for the tax liability. And this is the biggest thing that people are missing out on right now. I do student loan consultations every week, roughly about 17 consultations a week. And the majority of people have no idea that they're going to have to pay taxes. They just get on the income-driven plan, they're riding it out, and they're hoping for the best. Their payment is low, and they're just, living their life. But what's going to happen is on all of these plans that we're talking about, ICR, IBR, pay as you earn, and we got one more to talk about, revised pay as you earn, you're going to get to the end of a 20 or 25-year period, and they're going to forgive whatever you didn't pay off. Well, why would you have something that didn't get paid off? It's because it's based on your income. So let's give you a real life example. I am a physician. Well, I went to medical school, actually. I'm not a physician. I went to medical school, and I borrowed $300,000 to, attend medical school. Well, I get out of medical school, and I decide, first day on the job, my boss is mean, and I don't know, something gross happens, and I'm just like, I cannot do this job. Instead, I'm going to go be a school teacher. Well, now I have $300,000 of student loan debt, and I probably would have earned income to be able to help me pay that debt off, or I might have been able to go for something like public service loan forgiveness because I was working in a hospital. However, I decided I wanted to go, well, I don't want to be a teacher because that's going to mess up my scenario. I'm going to go be a manager at Starbucks. So, I'm going to take my high-level skills. I have multiple degrees, and I'm going to go work at Starbucks. Well, my Starbucks salary, while good, I made $70,000 a year at Starbucks. It doesn't help me pay off this $300,000 of loan. And the way they're going to calculate my payment on my $300,000 is it's 10% of income. So let's say I need to pay, $3,500 a month in order to pay the loans off in a reasonable amount of time, and I'm paying $350 a month. Well, what's happening to the loans? Interest is accruing, and the loan balance is going up. So a lot of you may be seeing this and not understanding like exactly why it's happening. You're like, oh my goodness, I'm paying my loans like they told me every single month, and at the end of the year, I look at it and the loan balance is bigger. Like I'm just like throwing money into a black hole. That's exactly the way that the income-driven plans are meant to work. They're based on your income, but what's going to happen is because that loan balance continues to go up on you, at the end of the time period, it's meant to be forgiven. You walk away from that amount that's been forgiven. However, you need to pay taxes as if you earned that amount in that year. So in my scenario, as me as the physician making $70,000 a year, I get to the end of the loans and let's say I owe $500,000. I'm throwing out numbers tonight. We could do a scenario if you guys want, but so I get there and my loans are $500,000. They forgive the $500,000 20 years from now, and I need to pay taxes as if I earned my regular $70,000 plus $500,000 on top of that. It's going to be a big tax liability. The thing you can do to work around that is do a calculation and find out how much money do I need to save in order to be able to pay, $150,000 of taxes 20 years from now. And it might be like, $150 a month. So it sounds a lot better like, oh, I just need to save $150 a month in order to make sure I have my $150,000 20 years from now when this $500,000 loan balance gets forgiven, even though I only borrowed $300,000. So hopefully I'm not losing you guys in the scenario here, but the income-driven repayment plans are meant for you to have your loan balance go up, and for that amount to be forgiven, and then for you to pay a tax liability on the amount that's forgiven. And that actually ends up being cheaper than having paid the loans in full over time. So it's one of those things where you got to really understand that this is a strategy. It is, while it doesn't feel good, it is a strategy, and it's a cost-efficient strategy as opposed to those other plans we talked about earlier. So Naima says, how much do I need to save each month to pay the amount that will be forgiven in 20 years? So that's what I do in my work, in my consulting work, is do that calculation for you, because it's going to be different for every single person. So one thing we're going to have to do is know how much money you make and know how your money is going to increase over time, or your earnings are going to increase over time. We also need to know your student loan balance and how much we can expect that to grow over time. So like I said, you may end up with a $300,000 bonus balance when it's all said and done. I may end up with a $500,000 balance. And Naima may end up with a $250,000 balance. It just depends on how much we borrowed. It depends on how much we make. It depends on how much we're paying. All of those things are factors, and it also depends on when you started saving. So let's say you've been on pay as you earn for 5 years right now, and you've never saved a dollar. Well, I can do the calculation for you to say, okay, you need to save X number of dollars. You're gonna have to save more because you only got 15 years left, and if you had started saving, at the very beginning, you had 20 years to save. So it's just the answer is that it depends on how much you need to save each month. All right, so then last but not least, as it relates to income-based repayment plan or income-driven repayment plans, see, I'm even saying acronyms wrong, we have the revised pay-as-you-earn plan. So like the pay-as-you-earn plan, it is also based on 10% of your discretionary income. So these two are going to calculate the payments the same. So you're like, well, if they have the same payment, why are there two different plans? Well, this one you pay over 25 years. And everybody is eligible for it. So remember, on the pay-as-you-earn plan, you're only eligible for it if you borrowed after October 1st of 2007. So you may not be eligible for pay, and you're like, well, what's the other thing I can do to get me a low payment? It's revised pay-as-you-earn. Now, like all things, there are caveats. So what do we need to be thinking about as it pertains to revised pay-as-you-earn? It is always going to take into account both you and your spouse's income. So income is automatically married. That's me saying that if I have a spouse, my spouse's income is going to be required when I fill out my paperwork every year, and that is going to be calculated. That's going to be used to calculate my student loan payment. So it could give me a higher student loan payment each month, and then every year, we're going to be doing the same thing. So if the payment is high enough that the household-wise, we're bringing in enough income, we're going to pay the loans off, then I might want to look at refinancing, which is why it's a really important thing for you all to have the conversation with your spouse about, marrying finances. Are we going to work together in our finances, or is this my student loan debt that I have to figure out on my own? And if so, then we need to talk about doing marry filing separately. So a lot of people are doing this, and it's not always appropriate for you. Marry filing separately is allowed on IBR, ICR, or pay as you earn. So those first three programs that we talked about, you can do marry filing separately, which means only my income will be taken into consideration. My spouse's income will not be taken into consideration. That'll keep my student loan payment lower. However, there's tax drawbacks to doing marry filing separately. So you got to kind of weigh the pros and cons. And you also need to know that you can amend your tax returns back to marry filing jointly after you did marry filing separately. So that's another little nugget that a lot of people don't know about. You can amend the returns. You want to work with an accountant to do that, but you can definitely do that. Samantha says, so this forgiven amount is basically considered as income. So yes, at the end of the 20 or 25 year period, what happens is whatever is forgiven is considered income for IRS purposes, and you will pay taxes as if you earned that amount of income that year. So that money is being paid to the IRS, not to the federal student loan company, which technically they're all one and the same, but yeah, the differentiation is on your tax return in that year. You'll owe additional taxes. And if we just go based off of the current tax rates, you can assume you'll be in the highest tax bracket because you'll have, a really large amount forgiven. And so that's how we do the math, is based on what the tax brackets are now, you being in the highest tax bracket, and then getting it forgiven from there. So with revised pay as you earn, you have to marry the income. So if there's two people, take into consideration what it's going to look like to pay based on two people. Make sure to have a conversation with your spouse about, what it looks like for us to try to pay these loans off, or whether revised pay as you earn is good. The other thing I'll say is a lot of people, as they're dating, they're like, oh, my spouse has an astronomical amount of student loan debt, I don't want to marry them. The key thing is to know and have a plan. And if two people have student loan debt, sometimes it improves the possibility of getting forgiveness, and it actually makes it better. So when you have large student loan debt, don't not go on a date with someone that you're interested in because they also have large student loan debt. You all can make it work together, and it can actually be more cost efficient for everybody in the long term. So what other options do we have? So we have the 4 different income-driven options, but with those 4 different income-driven options, those are all what we call taxable forgiveness that you're going for at the end. There is another type of forgiveness, and it's what we call public service loan forgiveness. So I mentioned it a little bit earlier. It is for people who are interested in public service. So whether that is working at a nonprofit, working at a government agency, working in a school system, those sorts of things. If your school or if your organization qualifies for public service loan forgiveness, you have the ability to make 10 years of qualifying payments. So it's actually 120 payments total. And then you have no tax liability at the end. So that's a big difference between the other ones. The first 3 things, or the first 4 things I talked about, you pay for 20 or 25 years, and then it's forgiven, but you pay taxes. This one, we've cut the timeline down all the way to 10 years, and then you get it forgiven completely. No tax liability at all whatsoever. So you see why this can be a very advantageous thing to do. The other thing is, a lot of times people will be working at a place that qualifies for public service, but they don't know that, like, if they can qualify, or they don't want to work full time. They're doing it a little bit. So part-time is allowed, but part-time is not the typical 20 hours a week. It is 30 hours a week if you want to go part-time and you work at a qualified employer. Now, last but not least, some people are probably listening to this and they're saying, I heard it was fake. I heard only 1% of the people are getting forgiveness. It's not a real program. That is baloney. The problem is that with public service loan forgiveness, it is actually a program where you need to meet certain criteria. So 1, you got to work at a qualifying employer. 2, you have to have direct loans. We talked about this before. If you borrowed after after 2010, your loans are automatically direct. If you borrow before that date, your loans may not be direct. And so the reason that we've seen the numbers be low for public service loan forgiveness is because some people borrowed 2007, 2008, 2009, even before that, and they had those FFEL loans, and they didn't realize they needed to consolidate them. So they did not familiarize themselves with the criteria, and the program was very new. So they were kind of doing a little bit of catching up and making people aware. And people didn't know what questions to ask, to say, like, hey, I think I work at a qualifying place. What do I need to do? They didn't ask any questions. So 10 years rolled by from 2007 to 2017, and the first people are supposed to get their forgiveness. Well, not a lot of people enrolled in the program. It was before 2010, so a lot more people had FFEL loans, not the right kind of loan. Some of them were on that extended or graduated plan because they wanted a really low payment, when they should have been on the income-driven repayment plan, because that's one of the requirements, is that you're on income-driven and you're certifying your income every year. And so they missed out because they didn't meet the 4 criteria. So to run over them again, direct loans, qualifying employer, 120 payments, and then being on one of those income-driven repayment plans. If you do those 4 things, you can get public service loan forgiveness. All right, so then what other considerations do we need to think about here? So the first thing I would say is that when you move your money from one plan to another, your interest will capitalize. So you may have listened to me describe those 4 different plans. You may be the person that's on ICR tonight, and you're like, oh man, I got this messed up. I need to switch to that repay or that pay as you earn. It sounds like I should be eligible for those. I'm going to take Lauren's advice. The one thing I want you to be aware of is when you switch from one plan to the next, your interest will capitalize. So what do I mean when I say that? You may have a $100,000 student loan balance, and you have to make the numbers around 10% interest rate. So 10% every year with $10,000 is piling up on your loans because, let's just make it $9,000 every year is growing on your loan. Okay, no, let's go. 12% is your interest rate. Got to make these numbers around. So $12,000 is accruing every year for your loans. However, you pay, what is it equal to 2,000? $2,400 a month. No, not $2,400 a month. $200 a month, and that equals to $2,400 a year. So, anyways, long story short is that $2,000 is being paid of your $12,000 of interest, and $10,000 of it is accruing. So you got a $100,000 balance, and you got $10,000 of interest over here in a separate bucket. Well, another year goes by, you still got a $100,000 balance, but you also have another $10,000 of interest accruing. So the interest keeps going up and accruing, but it's doing so in a separate bucket. So you're only paying interest on this $100,000. You're not paying interest on the extra $20,000 of interest you've accrued so far. So you got this balance, and your overall loan balance is going up because your interest is, creeping up, but it's two separate buckets. Well, if you do something like switch plans, or if you don't recertify your income on time, what happens? The interest bucket that was over here pours over here into your $100,000 bucket, and now your loan balance is, in this example, $120,000. So now you're paying interest on $120,000 instead of paying interest on just the $100,000. So interest capitalization is something else to consider. It generally doesn't ruin the plan to go for forgiveness. It might just mean that you need to recalculate how much you need to save on a monthly basis. So then the second thing I have here is if you don't recertify on time, your interest capitalizes. So I just touched on that a little bit, running together with my various considerations. But that's what happens. If you don't recertify on time each year before that 12-month mark, which means submitting your income to them via your tax return or pay stub, your interest will capitalize. When you come out of a forbearance, your interest will capitalize. When you come out of the grace period when you finish school, your interest will capitalize. So those are all things to be taken into consideration. The next thing is, I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but I want to circle back to, is your tax filing status matters. So like I said, it's not a default. A lot of people are just like, I don't want to be bothered. I don't want my spouse in my business. I'm embarrassed about the loans. We're just going to do married filing separately. It's not always the most cost-efficient thing to do married filing separately. You need to have a clear plan to know that that is appropriate for you. It can be, but it may also be cost-prohibitive as well, which is why you need to understand whether you need to do married filing jointly or married filing separately, especially if you guys both have loans. It's generally more advantageous to go ahead and do married filing jointly, because what you don't realize is that they calculate the payment and then they give it proportionally to each set of loans. So if you owe $200,000 and your spouse owes $100,000, 2/3 of the payment that they've calculated goes toward your loans, 1/3 goes toward your spouse's. And so once again, if we're going for forgiveness, then it doesn't matter about, more is going toward mine versus theirs, unless, like I said, one person is going for public service and the other one is going for taxable forgiveness. So you just got to be mindful that the tax filing status does matter. The next thing is that when paying extra, you want to make sure that you say where it goes in writing. So right now we're in, like I said, what we call the COVID forbearance, and a lot of people have decided to attack their loans. So the first thing I would say, I'm jumping down to the COVID considerations already, but the first thing I would say is make sure that you want to pay your loans off. So you might just be throwing money into a black hole by paying extra to them when you could be putting that money into your savings account. So you need to make sure it's appropriate for you. But when you decide to pay extra, say, I want this extra principal, this extra amount applied to, the loan with the 6.5% interest rate. Otherwise, what they're going to do is if you got 7 loans, they're going to take your, $700 payment and they're going to put $100 toward each one, or they're going to they divide it proportionally based on how much you owe across all the different loans, which is going to be ineffective if you're trying to pay them off as quickly as possible. You want to knock out that high interest one first and pour all of your principal, all your extra money toward the principal of the one balance. So then after that, the FFEL loans and the Perkin loans that you need to consolidate them in order for them to be eligible. So I mentioned this before, that consolidation is necessary. Direct loans are necessary to get access to all of the programs that are wonderful within the federal system. So FFEL loans and Perkins loans, which are another one, they usually come out $5,000 amounts. And depending on what kind of job you have, they can be forgiven for various reasons. So you want to double check that they're not going to be forgiven on their own before you consolidate them. But otherwise, if you're going to consolidate, you need to consolidate in order to get access to pay as you earn and revised pay as you earn. So then last but not least, with other considerations is the COVID consideration. So like I said, I started to talk about it briefly when I was talking about paying the extra down toward your loans. But right now we're in COVID forbearance and you have 0% interest and $0 payments. So you should not have had to make a payment since March 13th. If you made a payment after March 13th and you didn't mean to, you can call them and say, give me my money back. I've had my clients do it. Somebody just kept paying because they were like, I'm not sure about this. I don't know. And they continued to pay. I was like, no, call them and tell you all the money back. So why would you want your money back? If you're going for forgiveness, whether that be taxable or public service loan forgiveness, you do not want to pay a penny extra toward your loans. You would much rather put that money into a retirement account for yourself, build your emergency fund, start saving for a down payment on your home. There's all kinds of productive things you can be doing with that money instead of throwing it into the black hole of student loans, that are not going to go down, that are not going to be, it's not realistic for you to pay them off. What you need to understand is whether or not they are realistic for you to pay them off. And then if you are a person where you're like, okay, I definitely am on a 3-year plan to pay my loans in full. You probably should have refinanced by now, but if you didn't, so like I said, you earn more than you owe is a general rule of thumb for the people who should be looking at paying their loans off. Then this might be the time to attack it. You're like, okay, I don't have to pay, and I got extra money. Let me start throwing money toward these loans because I got 0% interest. Much better than you can get by refinancing, which is different than consolidating. Which leads me to my final point, that consolidation and refinancing are not the same things. So I've talked a lot in this presentation about consolidating, but I did not talk a lot about refinancing. The first thing you need to know is that they're two entirely different things. So consolidation is something that happens inside of the federal system. If you log into Studentaid.gov, you'll see, like I said, your 10 or 15 loans listed there. And if you consolidated them, they would turn into 2 loans. It would say direct consolidated unsubsidized, direct consolidated subsidized. Those would be the 2 loans that you had. All you did, was take the loans and squish them down, and then they gave you an average interest rate based on all the loans that you had. Now, the benefit to doing so is what I said earlier, turning your FFEL loans and your Perkins loans into direct loans, getting access to other payment programs. It could help you get out of the grace period, faster. There are lots of different reasons to consolidate, but that happens in the federal system. Refinancing, on the other hand, is taking your loans out of the federal system and putting them with a private lender. So you probably get junk mail from SoFi, Earnest, Common Bond, and the list goes on. But those are private companies, and they're asking you to refinance with them, and the benefit of doing so being that they're going to give you a lower interest rate. You want to be very careful before you refinance, because once you do it, there is no going back. So with refinancing, you now enter the private system. You have a private loan, just like you would if you had a mortgage or a car, and you're governed by those rules. You no longer have access to the federal. So you lose your job and you need a smaller payment. Well, your refinancing company may or may not do that. With the federal system, you can switch to an income-driven plan. The other thing is that forbearance and deferment that we talked about, while I discouraged you from using it, it is something that you do have as an option in the federal system. Refinancing companies, sometimes, it varies. They can set up their own. Some of them do 3 months, some of them do 6 months. Some of them don't do it at all. Some of them have up to 18 months. So if you're going to refinance, you want to find out what kind of forbearance they have available to them with a private company, because they set up their own. You don't get that 3 years that you get with the federal company. And then the last thing is that when you do refinancing, your loans are now in a private system. So if you were to pass away, they would still come after your estate to collect on those loans. So like, let's say you had a car that was paid off, they would try to liquidate that. They would try to get money from your bank account, whatever they could to make sure your debts are paid. However, if you pass away with your federal student loan debt, those loans pass away with you. So no obligation to anyone else, no money taken out of your estate. You're just good to go if you pass away with federal loans. So you want to make sure before you go off and refinance that refinancing is right for you. And then you want to understand whether or not consolidation within the federal system is right for you. It's not appropriate for everybody. So as an example, you've been on this, webinar with me for an hour or so, and you're like, ooh, I'm going to consolidate because I have, FFEL loans. Well, if you've been paying since 2009 and we're in 2020, you're, 11 years into your income-driven repayment plan. So 11 years of your 25 years has passed. You might want to think twice before you do that whole consolidate and make them direct. Because what happens when you consolidate, you start your clock over. So it is like creating a new loan, even though it's within the federal system, and now you got to pay for 25 more years. So we don't necessarily want to do a consolidation unless we can do the math on it and say, okay, this is appropriate for you based on, you've been in this IBR for 3 years, but we got a long time to go. Based on where your income is going to go, this is going to save you more money. And you do those calculations to better understand whether consolidation is appropriate for you. So buyer beware before you do either of those things. And I'll finish by just saying before we start the question part, that there was a story recently where I had a young lady who went to brunch with her friends, and she, her friend was bragging about how she got a new low interest rate, and the young lady went and got the same, used the referral link and refinanced her loans and did the same thing. Well, she found me and my company afterward and was like, I think I need this consultation. I need to figure out how I'm going to pay my loans off. And because she had private loans, her only option was to pay those loans off. The saddest thing about that was that she had public service loan forgiveness available to her. So now she's looking at paying her loans off in 10 years in full. That is her only option. And her payment was $3,200 a month. Whereas she could have been on an income-driven repayment plan, and her payment was like $750 a month for 10 years. Big difference. You look at all the things you could have done with the difference between those two amounts. You could have maxed out your retirement plan. You could have, saved for that down payment. Like I said, got yourself on track for an emergency fund, etc. So you want to make sure that you're doing what's appropriate for you and not what your friend is doing, because you don't want to just have a plan that is not customized for yourself. All right, so, I do got one more slide after. Sorry about that. So ways to save. When we think about ways to save on our student loans, the first thing is you want to think about paying yourself first instead. So we spent a lot of time talking about these income-driven repayment plans. If you are on one of them, I just told you, do not pay an extra dollar towards your loan. What would you do instead? Load up your traditional 401k, your traditional IRA. Why? Because it's lowering what we call your adjusted gross income. And adjusted gross income is what they're using to calculate that payment every year. So if I have an extra $500 a month and I've got a fully funded emergency fund, where am I putting my extra $500? I'm going to increase my 401k contributions so they can take an extra $250 out of each paycheck. So now I'm saving for my own retirement, getting myself on track. Because the biggest thing I hear is that these student loans won't allow me to save for retirement. They're not allowing me to save for my goals and my dreams. By actually putting money away for your retirement, you are lowering your student loan payment and increasing your chances at financial success. So pay yourself first by saving for retirement. And then the other thing is mindset as it pertains to the tax bomb. So putting a little bit aside every month for that tax liability at the end, if you're going to go for the 20 or 25 year period, to make sure that you're ready, and automating that savings. So automating it in the sense that $200 every month goes straight into an account, and you don't see it, you don't get to spend it, it's for the tax bomb, and life is great. The other thing I'll say is that because you have a 20 or 25 year period, you don't want to put that money in a savings account. You probably want to put it in an investment account. So that's where it gets a little bit complicated for some people, but there are a lot of easy ways to invest. My favorite thing is Betterment, betterment.com. There's also Vanguard.com. There are tons of different investment options that are do-it-yourself, for do-it-yourselfers. Put money in there, set it aside, they'll set it and forget it, and then something that is conservative, and that money can grow for you. And so the last thing I'll say about a way to save is to hire somebody so you don't spend hours and hours doing research to figure out what the right plan is for you. I think you would see after all the after all the slides that I've gone through, all the different repayment options that exist, that while you may be more educated and you realize that each of these different plans exist for a different reason, you may not be sure which one is the right one for you. So wouldn't it be worth $300 to $500 if you can save $100,000 over time? I feel like that would be well worth it. That's one of the things though that you don't really feel it. You're like, oh my God, $500 is a lot of money to pay. But if you got a really low student loan payment and no plan, you're going to be like, well, this feels great, but you're not going to realize that years down the road, you paid $100,000 more on the loans than you could have by switching to a different plan. So save yourself money by investing in the help of someone else that is a professional. If you want to invest more time, take the information that I gave you today. Where I would go to get more information is studentloanplanner.com so that you can, better educate yourself and invest the time. Know that, giving up time is going to cost you dollars in some other way. We know that, time is also a cost in addition to the actual dollar cost. So you get to choose whether you want the convenience of talking to an expert who does it all the time, or if you want to invest the time, which you can very well do, to figure out which plan is going to be most appropriate for you. So with that, I think, is there one more slide? Is that? Oh, contact information. Yes. If you all want to reach out, then please do. So Lauren at studentloanplanner.com. If you heard all of this and you're like, oh my goodness, I gotta get my whole life together, not just my student loan life, worth-winning.com. And then I also have a podcast. So I'd really love it if people were interested in tuning into the podcast. People come on and they tell their money stories. And for me, the podcast is all about making people feel less ashamed about what they're handling in their finances. So big student loan debt is something that a lot of people are ashamed of. They're not talking to anyone about. They don't want to tell anybody that they have six-figure debt. I have plenty of people come on the podcast and talk about their six-figure debt in addition to all kinds of other financial mistakes that they made. Because if we can't learn from each other, then we're never going to go anywhere fast. So let's share information as much as possible.
Yes. Thank you so much, Lauren. This was extremely valuable. I feel like I learned something, and I am also a financial planner. So this is what I do in my day-to-day job as well. So I feel like I learned something. It was super, super informative. If there are questions, please drop your questions in the chat and we can answer those questions. Since there aren't any right now, I am going to actually start. Okay. The first question that I have, which might be a question other people have as well, is where would someone go in order to be able to check to see what type of repayment plan they're on?
Yes, that's a really good question. So the best place to start out is Studentaid.gov. So Studentaid.gov actually just revamped their whole site, and I'm so grateful for it because it was a complete nightmare. So we do know with the federal government, we kind of take what we get. But they do have a new nice online portal that makes it really easy for you to see, your loan balance, the number of loans you have, the time that you've been paying, when you're in repayment, etc. And then everybody has their own loan servicer. So some of the big servicers are Nelnet, Navient, Great Lakes, Fed Loans. And so you should be able to log into any of those portals as well. So you should have two logins, one from studentaid.gov and then one from whoever your servicer is. And that's where you can go and find out more information about what plan you're on. And you're right, so frequently people don't know. They just know that they're like income based, and because the acronyms sound the same. So they don't know if they're on pay, repay, income based, or ICR. They're trying to tell me that they're on an income driven plan, but they don't know which one of the four plans they're on. So you definitely want to double check that and then kind of compare to what we just talked about tonight. Is there a plan that might be better for me? Do I need to consolidate some of my loans to get access to that better plan?
And then the next question that I have, so I have I guess I have three questions. Since, I'm just waiting for the questions to flow in, but if not, I'll just get all the questions that I have answered.
Right. Don't be shy, ladies.
Yeah. Put your questions in there. No question is a bad question. So the next question that I have is, what would you say would be the first 5 steps someone embarking on this journey? They graduated from college and they're like, okay, I graduated. What should I do first? What are the first five things they should do?
So the first thing you should do when you graduate college is get a clear plan while you have that 6-month grace period. So look for a job. That would be one. But, really get a good understanding of what your loan options are and what you feel like is going to be the trajectory for your work. So that's the hard one. Is you get out of college and you're just like, well, I'm not really sure, I have an offer and it's $30,000. I'm not sure what it's like to get promoted there because I'm just getting started. And it's kind of hard to project out into the future what your income is going to look like. But understanding when you get to the end of this, what is your earning potential? Really understanding before you even take on the student loan debt is the best advice I can give what your earning potential is. Because that's where a lot of people, I said, are suffering right now. They're very ashamed because they have $300,000 of debt and $50,000 of income. And so to that person that is, here and hearing me and somewhere in that vicinity, do not be ashamed. Don't be afraid to tell someone, because that is the majority of your peers. So don't think that you are the only one that is in that situation. Like I said, I do roughly 17 calls a week, and over again, I'm seeing six-figure debt, and I'm seeing, an income that doesn't match that six-figure debt. So understand what your earning potential is, and then face your fears. So generally we say, like I said, if you earn more than you owe, then you're in a situation where you want to pay the loans off. And if your debt is twice as high as what you make, you're probably in a situation where you want to go for forgiveness. So like I said, I can do more specific calculations to say, like, whether you should be on this side or that side of the fence, but those are general rules of thumb. You make $50K, you owe $300. You need to be looking at these forgiveness options, and you need to be figuring out how to maximize them versus struggling and every time you get an extra $100 throwing it toward your debt. I'm not doing my 5 steps. I'm supposed to stick to the script.
I think that was maybe 3. That was 3 is good. 3
okay,
those are good. Those are good steps. So we do have a question that came in. So we'll stop from my questions and we'll go to this question. So it's from Carlette, and her question is, what advice do you have to those who ignore their student loan debt? I've heard people talk about this. How can this be wise?
Ignoring your student loan debt is not wise. As with all things, when you want to get rich, we need to get organized. We need to be responsible and get organized around whatever it is that we have in our lives. And so if rich is really a goal of yours, then you've got to take inventory of what you have going on in life and how can you best tackle those things. There are many people, like you said, that are just ignoring them, pretending like it's not going to exist. What's going to result? Your credit's going to be ruined. So, I wanted to go buy a house, but now I have terrible credit because I ignored my student loans. You go into what we call default with federal loans, or you can do it with either federal or private. And then they start to garnish your wages. So that's another thing is now your paycheck is being taken. Now they're taking their student loan payment, and that's going to throw off your budget as well. So don't ignore the student loans. And where most people are doing the ignoring is they're doing like a forbearance or deferment. And they'll do the whole 3 years of it, and then they'll consolidate the loans. Because remember, I told you that consolidating kind of creates a new loan. So they'll consolidate, and they'll get 3 more years of forbearance or deferment. So now they've ignored their loans for 6 whole years and pretending like they didn't exist and live their best life. Not wise at all, because guess what happens 6 years from now? All that interest has accrued, and now your loan balance is larger. Frequently, that's another thing that happens. People come and they're like, well, I'm looking for a plan so I can make a settlement, because I only borrowed $50,000 and my loans are $250,000. You ignoring your loans for 6 years and letting them grow to $250,000 is not something people are just going to forgive and say like, oh yeah, just give me $25K and we can call it even. That's not how the federal government works. So that catches up with people a lot. Do not bury your hand in the sand. It is easy to get a plan. You can do so in a 60-minute time frame and your life be changed. You're like, okay, now I know, knowing is half the battle. This is the best way to attack these loans. And I can continue to plan for the rest of my finances and the rest of my budget because I have clear information on what to do with this. Nobody is in a place where they can't do anything at all. I would say the people who are in the toughest place are people who borrowed 100% private debt. So a few situations I've seen, and things that you might want to talk to friends about avoiding, or children if you have children, is undergraduate school. You can only borrow about $30,000 of federal debt. So that's why I was saying, generally, if you only have undergraduate debt, it's $30K. Well, you go to big fancy Duke, and everybody's like, well, this is the first person in college to go, and I'm so proud and so happy, and et cetera, but you don't get a lot of financial aid because your parents make more money than that would allow them to get financial aid. And that what that is an indicator of is that they should have been saving for your education. Now, we're not judging any parents that didn't save for the education, but deciding to go to Duke when you're going to get no financial aid is a really big situation. So what happens? People go anyway. They take all private debt because they can only get that $30,000 of federal debt. And now they graduate school with $200,000 of private debt. That is a tough situation to be in because you get out of school and we know that average starting incomes are, like 30 to 60K and generally closer to the 30K side of things. Now, hopefully, if you go to a big fancy school, then it's going to be on the higher side. But all you have is private debt. And what did I say about private debt? You have very few options. So if your income doesn't match in the same way we just talked about 50 versus 300, my new scenario is like, you got maybe 60 and 200, but it's only private, so you don't have any income-driven options. In any other scenario, we'd be talking about forgiveness. Now there's no forgiveness. You got to figure out how to make money to make those payments work. So don't ignore it. Yeah.
And that goes right into my next question. As you're talking, I'm thinking of other questions.
Yeah.
So what tips right now, let's say right now, because a lot of people are virtual, they're doing virtual schooling and, you have high school seniors who are virtually online and considering what to do about college. What tips do you have for someone who is going to be going to college, whether that is in the spring or next fall, someone who's already in college, to be able to really make smart decisions about taking on student loans?
Yes, all the scholarships, all the grants, please spend a lot of time looking at the various options to get things for free. So Scholly, SCHOLLY, is a great app for looking for scholarships. And it's not just undergraduate scholarships, it's scholarships for graduate school as well. So do not underestimate the power of free money, and do not underestimate the idea of going ahead and filling out grant paperwork, filling out, essay, doing all the essays. So think about this. So a $500, like if you're up against a $10,000, amount that you need to pay, $500 may not sound like a lot, but if it takes you an hour to write an essay, you just made $500 in an hour if you get that scholarship. Even if it takes you 2 hours to write it really well, $250 an hour, like that's a good living. So you got to kind of change your mindset as it pertains to why am I doing this? No, it's not fun to write those essays. And yes, there's a chance you may not get anything. But to spend the time and invest that time to be able to have a lower student loan balance is a really, really important thing to be considering. So that's the thing I'd say for those that are interested in going to school, trying to get the debt as low as possible. And then, like I said, doing the research around what is going to be a realistic job that I can get, or what am I interested in, and what are the wages. So frequently, so the biggest one I see is veterinarians. Veterinarians end up finish school with around $400,000 of student loan debt. They make on average $80,000 to $120,000 a year. So people think veterinarians, I know I do because I have a Great Dane and it is expensive every time I go. I'm like, they should be balling, but the overhead for running a veterinarian clinic is quite a bit. And like I said, they're limited, like 80 to 100K. I mean, 80 to 120 is not a terrible salary, but when you got 400,000 of debt that no one knows about, it's a lot harder to be looking at, like, how am I going to figure this all out? So some people probably would not have gone to veterinary school if they realized they had to take out that much.
Mm-hmm. And then to add to that, for those who have younger children, if they are traumatized by their student loans, what are some things that they can do now for their young children to help to ease some of that burden for them when they are going to college?
Yeah, start saving would be thing number one. And 529 plans are great vehicles. Some people are now starting to use the Roth IRA, which I'm not a big proponent of, but it is a viable option. And then also start thinking about what is realistic. So like I said, I mentioned it earlier. I used the Duke as an example, and I don't want to pick on people who have gone to Duke. I don't have anything against them. But, there's some big schools that are very prestigious out there, and you may want your child to go to those schools to invest in their education in a way that makes them get scholarships and things like that would be a much better use of time than it would be to say, I'm not going to save anything for this child, and I'm going to try to force a big prestigious school on them and then have them, loaded down with student loan debt for the rest of their lives. So to start having those conversations about community colleges, start having conversations about, professions that are going to earn them a nice living. So we know the STEM programs do really well. So that's science, technology, engineering, and math. And to just be very realistic versus, letting it sneak up on you. Your kid's a senior in high school or junior in high school. They want to be an art major. And like I said, not throwing shade at all. But we know that there are things that are, far more likely to be high liability and low income versus low liability and higher income. Mm-hmm. So to really start planting those seeds and having those conversations and letting your children know that, money is a thing. It doesn't grow on trees. That's what I was told all the time as a child. And that we need to start making this plan together. You can achieve your dreams. You can go to the big prestigious school, but we need to start laying out that path and that foundation now, so that we have the best chance of doing that without it feeling like you made a terrible mistake in the future.
Do you have a question in the chat from Samantha? And her question is, what tips for paying private loans?
Yeah, so with private loans, I would say, find a way that is going to be affordable on a monthly basis and then attack them. So the key thing is having a good budget. If you don't have a budget and, money comes in and money goes out, you don't have a clear plan, you're just going to be paying on those loans forever. So the first thing is take inventory of your interest rate. See if you can get a better interest rate right out of the gate. So you can refinance as much as you want with private loans. So that's one thing people always say is like, well, I refinanced, but I heard the interest rates are low. I don't know if I should do it again. And, what are the pros and cons of doing so? When you do a refinance, it's just like when you were to buy a car, if you were to buy a home, there is a hard pull on your credit. Generally, hard pulls make your credit drop like 10 points. And as long as nothing bad happens in those next couple months, they're just like, oh, hey, something happened. We're going to drop. And then it goes back up. So 2 or 3 months later, your credit is right back where it used to be. So you wouldn't refinance right before you're going to buy a home because you probably need those 10 points to get approved for the best mortgage. So you want to make sure you're not buying anything else. But get the lowest interest rate possible. And the term, so let's say you look at it. So they're going to give you 5 years, 7 year, 10, 15, and 20s as options for repaying the loans. If you already have private loans and you need to get, like you said, if you have that $50,000 income and $200K of debt, you're probably going to need to spread it out over that 20-year period in order to just make it affordable for you to pay on a monthly basis. It's not going to be cost effective because we know the longer you stretch the loans out, the more you end up paying over time. However, if you're in a situation where you can pay, so let's say you do your budget and you say, I can pay $1,000 a month toward my loans. You go and you get on one of these refinancing sites and you see a lot of different options. And one of them is $250, one is $500, and one is $750. And you're like, well, I can pay $1,000 every month. It might be better to pick the $500 a month payment and then still pay $1,000 a month toward the loans to give yourself some wiggle room so that you're not strapped for cash should something happen. So you have this amount in your budget that you feel like is available, but at any point, you don't want to be stuck with, oh, I have to pay $1,000 every single month when, something comes up and you might need that cash flow for something. But definitely be as aggressive as possible about paying your loans back.
Another question from Crystal. How much would my credit be impacted if I paid my student loans?
So it's not going to really impact your credit. So this is, well, if you have private debt, it could slightly help you improve. So your debt to income ratio is what people are looking at sometimes. And you have a lot of debt on your credit. So that debt, you feel like is holding your credit down. So one of the things I want to explain about student loans is that it's not what we call revolving debt. So credit card debt is the thing that I would be focusing on if you have credit card debt over student loan debt. Because revolving debt is, something that happens on a monthly basis. They're checking it. And when you have revolving debt, they're also calculating your utilization. So as an example, you have a credit card and it's a $10,000 limit and you're using $9,999. Well, that's going to make your credit go down, even if you're able to make the minimum monthly payment every month on time, because they're like, well, you got $10,000 available to you and you're using all of it. So that's a bigger problem for you. And you have the potential to be buried because we know credit cards have double-digit interest rates. Whereas the student loans, while you may have $100,000 balance, you have maybe the 7% interest rate in the federal system, and it is what we call installment debt. Installment debt is similar to, like I said, your mortgage or your car, where you pay over a period of time, and it's either it's paid off, or in this situation, it's not that it's paid off. Even if you're going for forgiveness, but you're paid in full as per the terms of the loan. And so that's what they're looking at. Your credit is not going up or down based on that student loan balance going up or down. In fact, it's going based on, did you pay on time? So late payments are going to be the thing that are going to affect installment debt, and getting 90 days behind, getting 120 days behind, etc. So that's the main thing you want to think about as it pertains to your credit and student loans.
Great. And so I have another question.
Yeah.
This might be our last question because we do have a giveaway, but if not, if someone has a question, feel free to throw it in there. But since we are in an election season and we're getting very close to the election, I hope everyone's registered to vote. If you're not, check your registration, vote early if you can, get those ballots in. This election is super important. Whichever way you're voting, just make sure your vote counts. But I say all that to say, the hot topic is, of course, student loan forgiveness. What is all that about? Do you know anything about Biden's, student loan plan? What do you think might actually come to fruition? Because there's a lot of things on the table. Are all of those things going to actually happen? Tell me your predictions.
Yeah, so this is actually a really good question to end on because I get it, like you said, all the time. And people are kind of like, oh my goodness, I don't want to pay my student loans because someone's going to swoop in with a cape and just get rid of all of it for me. Or, this COVID forbearance even has given people kind of false confidence that this is going to carry on forever. I do believe that COVID is probably going to be extended one more time. And the last that we saw in the stimulus packages and things that were being produced were either through tax season or all the way through September of next year. So there is a possibility that could happen, and you could have a whole year of not paying your student loans when you have these federal loans, which could be awesome. But eventually, this debt is going to come due. We can't wipe out 3 million people's student loan debt in its entirety and not think that that's going to have an impact on the economy. We don't have a magic wand, even though the government likes to pretend they do. And the other thing we have to think about is, like you said, everything operates as a business. So the economy right now, even with the stimulus packages and things that were offered via COVID, over the last, we're going to have to pay for that at some point. So I would not be putting my eggs in the basket of someone swooping in and saving us from our student loans. However, Joe Biden's plan is to do a $10,000 payment toward everybody's loans. So once again, that sounds awesome. Yay, Joe, that's $10,000 less than I had to pay. But if you are that, what I say earlier, my $50,000 person that owes $300,000, going from 300 to 290 didn't really make a dent in your loans. You're still going to go for forgiveness. So while the plan sounds amazing and everybody's, singing the praises, what he means by it, and, he does have good intentions. We have a lot of people that do have, $10,000 or $15,000 of student loan debt. And those are people who are pretty much, went to these trade schools like ITT Tech or, some of those schools you kind of see on television on a regular basis. And, they didn't their school closed. They didn't end up with work or income. They come from low income communities, and getting rid of that debt is going to, like I said, impact their credit drastically, give them a chance to get a fresh slate. And so, there's tens of thousands of people at that very low level of just debt that's just kind of ruining their ability to do day-to-day things. And that's who Joe's plan is going to make a difference for. $10,000, we know for the most of us, is not going to make a big difference. Now, where you can be kind of on that bubble is, like you said, you only got the undergraduate loans. You only borrowed $30,000. He knocks you down to 20. Now you're like, okay, I'm cooking with grease. I can definitely pay this off, and it gives you that extra motivation. So, his plan can be good and it can help people, but you also have to be realistic because, like I said, that's what he's offering right now. We don't know if it's going to happen. We don't know how long it's going to take for it to happen. And then, it's not going to turn into from 10,000 to 100,000. If he's already saying he can only do 10, maybe everybody meets in the middle and they get 5. So don't make a plan based on like, oh, I'm going to keep my federal loans forever and ever. If it's not applicable, like if you know that $10,000 is not going to make or break you as it pertains to what your overall plan should be.
I've been seeing so much news around this. And of course, like I read some of the bullet points of it. And it's always interesting to see like, okay, they say all of these lofty dreams, they're selling you dreams, of course, because they want your vote. But how much of this is actually going to come to fruition? So I love, really focusing on what you can control and taking the steps to make a plan for yourself. And then if there is a little bit of an extra bump, take it and keep on moving. So thank you so much, Lauren. This was phenomenal. I hope that everyone enjoyed this as much as I did. We do have a giveaway, and the giveaway, because at Young Rich and Responsible, we love to give things away. Who doesn't love free? The giveaway is going to be a life coaching session with Deirdre. So if you would like to put in the chat, I'll give you guys and gals 2 minutes to type something up. What is the one action you are going to take from this session today and get yourself on the right track for your student loans? Just write down one action you're going to take after today. 2 minutes.
And while they're typing, I'll just say, too, that, like you said, there are 2 presidential candidates. I did only talk about one. That, the plan has changed quite a bit. So President Trump had a plan on the table, during his time in office, and it never came to fruition. And the previous plan that he had was not a very good one in comparison to, like I said, so we do math on, how his plan would have paid out. And I actually had like a little line item at one point saying like, just so you know, this is what he's proposing. And if it does get taken into consideration, here's how it weighs against all the different plans that exist currently. So previous plan was not very good. And I haven't seen very much information on a new plan in light of, like you said, COVID and everything. So we have gotten the COVID forbearance and we're talking about extending it. So we'll see what happens. But President Trump does also have a plan.
Because,
Yeah, Crystal, please do log in. So public service loan forgiveness. If you work at a government agency, a nonprofit, if you're a teacher, those are all sorts of things. So generally physicians, nurses, teachers, like I said, people who work at any kind of nonprofit, all the kind of government agencies, local, state, and federal, those are people who generally qualify for public service. 10 years, your loans could be done. And I think I have here too. So studentloanplanner.com if you want help with your loans. If you want help with, like you said, your full financial picture, that's worth-winning.com. Happy to help you all. Like I said, 60-minute sessions is what we offer at Student Loan Planner. So literally fix your whole student loan life in 60 minutes or less. And you can have a clear plan and feel really good about it. See my Kel's here.
15 seconds left. Drop the one action you're going to take after your session today to win a life coaching session with Deirdre.
Samantha says she's going to make a solid plan to pay off her private loans. Yes. Wow. This is the perfect thing to do. Exactly. So yeah, that's one of the things I talk about, like what to be doing in COVID forbearance. Like if you have both federal and private, leave those federal be and take advantage of the fact that you don't have to make a payment on those and go ahead and start attacking those private loans. So great idea, Samantha.
Alrighty, time is up. So the person who has won the giveaway of one free life coaching session with Deirdre is Crystal. Congratulations. She said she's going to log into her account and see what kind of repayment plan that she's on and whether or not she qualifies for a PSLF, or the Public Student Loan Forgiveness Plan. That is a great step. I love how detailed it is, and that you're going to, you're going to check that box off to see if you would qualify for that. So congratulations, Crystal. Please reach out to us. Reach out to my Cal via DM on Instagram. That would probably be the best way to get in touch with her. And congratulations, Lauren. Thank you so much. I'm so glad that we were able to talk about student loans. You are an expert in student loans. You're, she's also an Olympian. Okay, 2-time. She's got all of the medals. So thank you so much. If you guys have other questions, guys and gals, please reach out to us, and we'll be able to answer those for you.
Yeah, and I'm pretty easy to find on social media as well. So if you have additional questions, I'm happy to help.
Perfect. Alrighty, everyone can head back over to the stage at 8:35 for another giveaway. Thank you for attending the workshop. See you later.